Can a black belt really break a brick with their bare hand? We're diving into the science of martial arts to separate fact from fiction, exploring the real-world applications and myth-busting common beliefs about their effectiveness. Imagine this: a dimly lit dojo, a stern master dressed in traditional robes, and a student flying backward from a single touch to the chest. The audience gasps. Cameras roll. It looks like magic, a demonstration of chi, energy, or a death touch that knocks someone out without force. But what if I told you that entire scene is based on myth, not science? Martial arts have always carried an air of mystery. Passed down through generations, filled with ancient traditions and cinematic flair, these practices are as much about storytelling as they are about combat. Movies, legends, and exaggerated demonstrations have shaped the way we perceive martial arts, often blurring the line between fact and fiction. Take the legendary one-inch punch made famous by Bruce Lee. It looks unreal. A small movement sending a person flying backward. Some believe it's evidence of mystical power. But when scientists analyze it, they see a combination of speed, timing, structure, and biomechanics, not magic. It's a real technique, but it's often misunderstood and exaggerated, becoming fuel for myths. This is the world we're stepping into, one where truth and fantasy collide. Where the idea of a warrior defeating multiple opponents with a single sweeping kick sounds compelling but rarely holds up under real-world conditions. Why? Because actual combat is messy. It's unpredictable. It relies on variables that myths tend to ignore, like adrenaline, fear, reaction time, fatigue, and environmental factors. In this documentary, we're peeling back the curtain. We're stepping into the lab, into the gym, and into the arena. We're examining martial arts with the critical eye of science, and asking tough questions. What works? What doesn't? And why do so many people still believe in techniques that have little to no scientific backing? Martial arts is not the enemy here. In fact, the beauty of martial arts lies in its diversity, discipline, and depth. The issue is the misinformation that surrounds it. From chi blasts that supposedly knock opponents unconscious to the belief that pressure points can end a fight instantly, there's a sea of myths out there. And while some techniques are rooted in truth, many have been distorted over time. Why is this important? Because misinformation in martial arts isn't just harmless fun. It can lead to false confidence, dangerous training habits, or even failure in real self-defense situations. A person believing they can disable an attacker by tapping a certain spot might find themselves in serious trouble when that technique fails. That's why understanding the science is critical. It's not about ruining the magic, it's about staying safe and staying real. Science helps us decode the mechanics behind what looks like magic. When a skilled practitioner performs a spinning back kick that lands perfectly, it's not sorcery, it's physics. It's momentum, torque, balance, and years of repetition. When a master breaks a stack of bricks, there's no spiritual power involved, it's knowledge of structural weaknesses, velocity, and follow-through. We live in a time where we can use slow-motion cameras, force sensors, and biomechanics analysis to test martial arts claims. And what we've found over the years is that some myths do have a kernel of truth, just wrapped in layers of exaggeration. Others? They collapse under scrutiny. This video will explore the science behind martial arts. Not to dismiss tradition, but to understand it better. To separate what works in controlled demonstrations from what holds up in real combat. To uncover why certain techniques thrive in competitions like MMA, while others remain purely theatrical. We'll talk to experts. We'll analyze evidence. And we'll challenge assumptions, all to get closer to the truth. In the end, the goal is simple, not to diminish martial arts, but to elevate it, by grounding it in reality. By understanding what's possible and what's pure performance. Because when you strip away the myths, what remains is something even more impressive, the real power of human movement, strategy, and resilience. So, let's begin the journey. Let's explore the myths, uncover the science, and find out what martial arts really looks like when fiction steps aside and facts step in. In countless action movies, a single punch is enough to drop even the most imposing opponent. A swift strike to the chin, and suddenly the villain is unconscious, crumpling to the ground as if struck by lightning. This image has become a staple of martial arts mythology, the legendary one-punch knockout. But is this phenomenon real? Can one perfectly delivered blow truly end a fight instantly, every time? Or is it more myth than reality? To understand the allure of the one-punch knockout, we must begin with its emotional appeal. It promises simplicity, a decisive end to conflict with minimal effort. It aligns with our love for heroes who don't need to struggle. A punch, a pause, and silence. But in the real world, fights are rarely that clean. The human body is surprisingly resilient, and while knockouts are certainly possible, they are far more complex than films would have us believe. Let's explore the science. A knockout typically occurs when the brain rapidly shifts inside the skull due to a sudden impact. This causes a brief interruption in normal brain function, leading to unconsciousness. The most common knockout area is the jaw, specifically, a punch that twists the head violently, sending rotational force to the brain. This is why strikes to the chin are often seen as effective. The chin acts like a lever, and when hit correctly, it causes the head to snap around with force. However, achieving a one-punch knockout requires a precise combination of factors. The punch must land cleanly on a vulnerable spot. The timing must be perfect. The attacker must generate enough force. And most importantly, the opponent's body must be unprepared, not braced, not aware, and not moving in a way that minimizes impact. That's a lot of variables. In combat sports like boxing and MMA, knockouts do happen. But even among trained athletes, a one-punch KO is rare. Fighters often absorb multiple heavy strikes before going down. They train their neck muscles, practice defensive movement, and build resilience over time. Many professional fights go the distance, 3 to 5 rounds, despite repeated, brutal punches. If one-punch knockouts were as reliable as movies suggest, fights would end in seconds. The myth of the one-punch KO is further fueled by selective memory. Spectacular knockouts are replayed on highlight reels and shared across social media. But what we don't often see are the hundreds of failed attempts, where a clean punch lands and the opponent simply absorbs it, shrugs it off, or counters. This skews perception. People begin to believe the knockout is common, when in truth, it's exceptional. Power also plays a critical role. Generating knockout force isn't about muscle size alone, it's about technique, speed, and body mechanics. The best strikers use their entire body to deliver a punch. It starts at the feet, travels through the hips and shoulders, and explodes at the point of contact. This kinetic chain multiplies force. But even then, landing such a punch cleanly, on a moving, resisting opponent, is not guaranteed. There's also the question of pain tolerance and psychological resistance. Some individuals can take an enormous amount of punishment without losing consciousness. Adrenaline, determination, and prior conditioning all affect how a person responds to being hit. This is why self-defense instructors often caution against relying on any one technique, especially one that assumes instant victory. Now, let's examine the cultural influence. Martial arts films, especially from the 1970s and 1980s, elevated the one-punch KO to legendary status. Bruce Lee, Chuck Norris, Jet Li, and countless others delivered blows that seemed to defy physics. These moments were choreographed for impact and drama, not realism. Over time, these depictions shaped how people view fighting. But it's important to remember, movie fights are scripted. Real fights are unpredictable, messy, and chaotic. Consider street fights or self-defense scenarios. They often involve surprise, panic, multiple attackers, or environmental obstacles. In such situations, banking on a single punch to solve everything is not only unrealistic but dangerous. Even if someone trains extensively, real-world conditions are rarely ideal for executing that perfect strike. Darkness, stress, fear, or uneven footing can affect performance. That's why self-defense experts emphasize awareness, escape tactics, and disabling techniques over cinematic punches. That doesn't mean the one-punch knockout is a complete myth. It is possible, but it's the exception, not the rule. A punch delivered with perfect timing, targeting a vulnerable spot, and amplified by flawless mechanics can shut down the body's systems. But that situation is rare and often unpredictable. And in a high-stakes confrontation, relying on it is akin to gambling. It's also worth addressing the difference between knockouts and knockdowns. A knockdown is when a person falls due to a hit but remains conscious. Many confuse the two. In reality, most fights, even in professional settings, involve knockdowns that don't end the match. Recovery happens quickly. Only certain strikes, under certain conditions, cause a true blackout. Furthermore, some people appear to be more knockout-prone than others. Genetics, previous concussions, and neurological factors can affect one's susceptibility. This adds another layer of unpredictability. You might hit one person and drop them immediately. You might hit another just as hard and see no effect. That variability alone should caution anyone against assuming consistency in combat results. One additional scientific insight comes from measuring punch force. On average, a trained boxer can deliver around 700 to 1,000 pounds of force in a punch. That's significant, enough to cause serious damage if placed correctly. But again, the human skull is built to withstand pressure. The brain floats in cerebrospinal fluid, offering a cushion. The body's design offers some natural protection, which is why it takes more than just raw power to knock someone out. Ultimately, the myth of the one-punch knockout persists because it satisfies a human craving for dominance and control. It's the fantasy of solving conflict instantly, cleanly, and decisively. But the real world is rarely so tidy. Even the best fighters prepare for endurance, defense, and follow-through. Victory is built on consistency, not a single moment of brilliance. In conclusion, while the one-punch knockout is not impossible, it is far from guaranteed. The myth has roots in truth but has grown into something larger than life, thanks to media, selective memory, and cultural storytelling. Science brings clarity to the legend. It shows us what's required, what's rare, and what's realistic. And in doing so, it helps martial artists become more prepared, more grounded, and ultimately, more effective. From ancient scrolls to modern action flicks, pressure points are often depicted as mystical switches on the human body. Tap one and your opponent collapses, convulses, or instantly falls unconscious. Hollywood loves this idea. Martial artists with secret knowledge can paralyze, knock out, or even kill with a precise touch. But how much of this is true? What does science say about the legendary pressure point? Let's start by defining what pressure points are. In traditional martial arts, especially those with roots in Chinese medicine like Kung Fu or Dim Mak, pressure points are said to be vulnerable areas on the body where nerves, blood vessels, or energy pathways, meridians, converge. These points, when struck or pressed correctly, are believed to cause pain, disrupt movement, or affect internal organs. Some styles claim they can control life force, qi, to heal or harm. That sounds impressive, but here's the reality: many so-called pressure points do correspond to anatomical weak spots. The human body has vulnerable areas: the eyes, throat, groin, solar plexus, and carotid arteries, to name a few. These are not mystical, but biological. Striking them can cause pain, disorientation, or even unconsciousness in some cases. So yes, there is some truth, but it's buried under layers of exaggeration and mysticism. Take, for example, the carotid sinus, located in the neck, near the carotid artery. Applying pressure here can cause a sudden drop in blood pressure and heart rate, leading to fainting. Medical professionals sometimes use this response, called a vagal maneuver, to reset certain heart rhythms. Striking this area in a fight, however, is not easy. It's a small, moving target on a resisting opponent. Miss it, and you've wasted an opportunity. Hit too hard, and you risk causing serious injury, even death, which brings legal and ethical complications. Similarly, the solar plexus, located just below the sternum, is another real-world target. A solid blow here can knock the wind out of someone, causing temporary incapacitation. But again, this is not magic. It's anatomy and physics. No need to invoke ancient energy maps when the nervous system and biomechanics offer a clear explanation. So where do the myths begin? Much of it comes from misinterpretation. Traditional martial arts texts often used symbolic language, energy pathways, meridians, life force, as a way to describe sensations or effects. Over time, these metaphors were taken literally. Combine that with secrecy and mystique, and you have the recipe for exaggerated legends. Martial arts masters were often revered, and their teachings became sacred stories rather than testable techniques. Modern science, however, is not interested in tradition, it's interested in evidence. Researchers have tested pressure point techniques under controlled conditions. The results are clear: while some strikes can cause pain or momentary disorientation, there's no scientific proof of points that cause instant paralysis, unconsciousness, or death from a light touch. In most cases, the so-called pressure point techniques require cooperation. They work in demonstrations, but fail under resistance. Consider police and military training. These professionals deal with real violence, under stress, with lives on the line. If pressure point knockouts were reliable, they would be taught as standard. But they're not. Instead, the focus is on gross motor skills, strikes, holds, and techniques that work even when adrenaline clouds fine movement. Pressure point theories, if they appear at all, are taught as supplementary, not primary tools. There's also the problem of variability. Different people respond differently to pain. What works on one person may not work on another. Pain tolerance, muscle mass, hydration, adrenaline, all affect how someone reacts. That makes pressure point strikes highly unreliable, especially in chaotic real-world situations. But let's not throw everything out. Some pressure point techniques do align with known neurological and anatomical structures. For instance, striking the side of the knee can destabilize the leg due to the common peroneal nerve. A hit to the jaw may cause a knockout due to rotational brain trauma. These are pressure-sensitive areas, but again, not in the mystical sense. They're simply structural vulnerabilities, just like a car has weak spots in its frame. The danger lies in over-reliance. Believing in pressure point myths can create a false sense of security. If a martial artist expects a single finger jab to disable an attacker and it fails, they may be unprepared for the consequences. That gap between expectation and reality is dangerous. Real self-defense demands adaptability, awareness, and multiple options, not blind faith in secret spots. It's also important to note that real fighting rarely allows for surgical precision. Fights are dynamic. People move, flinch, resist, and strike back. The idea that you'll calmly tap someone behind the ear while under threat is unrealistic. Stress affects fine motor skills. Under adrenaline, even skilled practitioners struggle to aim with pinpoint accuracy. That's why modern combatives rely on large target strikes, head, torso, limbs, and simple tactics that don't require perfection. One reason pressure point myths persist is because they're easy to sell. Instructors use them to create mystique, elevate their status, or attract students. Demonstrations in dojos often involve compliant partners who react dramatically to light touches. But that's not evidence, that's choreography. When tested in competitive environments, like MMA or real-world scenarios, these techniques disappear. They're replaced by grappling, striking, and strategies grounded in physics and physiology. This doesn't mean traditional martial arts have no value. Far from it. Many contain deep insights into movement, timing, and human psychology. But separating the effective from the mythical is crucial. That's where science steps in. By testing techniques under pressure, measuring their impact, and observing their real-world effectiveness, we get a clearer picture of what actually works. Interestingly, modern medicine and martial arts do share some common ground. Acupuncture, once dismissed entirely, has found limited acceptance for pain relief in certain contexts. Pressure therapy and trigger point release are used in physical therapy. These techniques manipulate the body's nerves and tissues, not to knock someone out, but to promote healing. It's a reminder that knowledge evolves, and some ancient ideas may hold fragments of truth. In the end, the real power lies in understanding. Knowing where the body is vulnerable is valuable. But it must be paired with practicality. Can you reach the spot in a real fight? Can you apply it under stress? Will it work against someone who is resisting? These are the questions that separate martial science from martial myth. In conclusion, pressure points are real, but not magical. They represent anatomical weaknesses, not secret buttons. Movies exaggerate them, myths distort them, and bad instructors exploit them. But through critical thinking and scientific inquiry, we can extract what's useful and discard what's fantasy. The result is martial arts that are smarter, safer, and more effective, grounded not in legend, but in reality.